and I've been working, with horses since I was, like 8 years old. I had to think about her differently than I've thought for 25 years.
You mentioned it is complicated having a barefoot horse.
Not all candidates. You'll make more horses lame insisting on everyone being barefoot, then you'll make them better.
Hi, Karl. Thank you so much for being here.
It's so good to be here.
We're so thrilled to have you on the show. All right, first question. Karl, one of your top horses, Caracal de la Roque, is barefoot. Could you tell us a little bit about why you choose not to shoe her, and how has that affected her performance?
So in this case, she was unshod when we bought her, and except for a couple grass shows here and there before we bought her, she's never worn shoes in her life. So
Amazing.
It wasn't a case of us transitioning a shod horse. It was us getting an unshod horse. And
was that the first one? Was that the first horse you ever received that was unshod?
Correct.
Interesting.
And for a lot of reasons that don't really pertain to this video, getting her was very daunting. So it was just another thing that made it more daunting, because there's a bunch of things about a barefoot horse that you don't normally think about when you have shod horses. So you had to, and I've been working, with horses since I was, like 8 years old. So I had to think about her differently than I've thought for 25 years. And it was a bit of a challenge and an adjustment, but it makes sense to keep her unshod. So you have to learn, you have to, adapt and get better.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned it is complicated having a barefoot horse. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. There's just so much more to think about. For us, our horses that have shoes get shod every 4 weeks. And after the shoer comes, as long as we like the balance, like how the shoe came out, the pad, whatever we're doing with that particular shoe, you don't really think about it much until the shoer comes again 4 weeks later. It's kind of one of those things that once it's done right, it's done right for like 4 weeks, which is great.
Which is great. Do it and leave it alone.
You toss them on a truck, great. You want to walk down a gravelly road, great. You want to go on a trail ride down a riverbed, also great. You want to, like all of these things don't have to think about.
Yeah.
But with an unshod horse, you have to. And I know that we take a very protective stance on how we do things because, a little stone can be a major problem for us, where if it's a trail horse, maybe less so in an unshod horse. Yeah. So, we put in rubber mats. We have a circle around our barn that's a gravel over asphalt, and we put in rubber mats for her. She has travel boots when she goes in the trailer. She has boots that go over her feet when she goes to the ring and back from the ring.
Same boots or different boots?
Different boots. The ones that go to the ring are less sturdy, but they're easier to put on and off because she gets excited when she goes to the ring. Where the ones in the trailer, they're quite secure, and they stay on very, very well. When you're at a show, you're also thinking, okay, what is the footing at the show? What about going from the stable at the show to the arena? You're thinking about so many more things in that side. And then on top of that, you're also looking, she gets shod or trimmed Major trimming every 2 weeks, but there's minor adjustments along the way. That's a logistical challenge.
Yeah. Is that an everyday thing, or is that once a week, or?
Like going back to what I said about the shod horses, you don't really look at the feet and their balance in the middle of their shoeing cycle. Where with her, I look at all of her feet every single day, and I almost think I go cross-eyed because I'm trying to look at the balance. I'm trying to look at, is the heel long enough, or the toe, or you're
an obsessive nature to it.
Yeah, because any detail that you miss has more consequences with a barefoot horse than with a shod horse.
So, I mean, it sounds like there's quite a lot of logistical issues. But yet your success with her has actually been tremendous. So do you have anyone else in the barn that now no longer has shoes? Have you taken anyone else's shoes off since having her?
I've definitely thought about it, because there's a couple of candidates. Not every horse can be barefoot.
What would make one horse a candidate versus another?
Their foot shape. And the quality of the horn. A hoof is essentially a horn, like a horn on a cow. Mm-hmm. And some horses, we've all seen it. Some horses' feet are more prone to crack, or more prone to crumble, or some weakness there, and you do need really good hoof to do barefoot. Okay. And you do need a certain just shape to the foot and conformation of the leg. Not every horse can be barefoot. Okay. I would love to have every horse barefoot, but it's impossible.
From a time standpoint, or just because they're not all candidates for it?
Not all candidates. You'll make more horses lame insisting on everyone being barefoot than you'll make them better. Okay. It again, emotionally, and like in your heart, you want them all to be barefoot, but you'll hurt more of them than you help. In all honesty, you will help some, but that's a smaller number than you'll help.
Yeah. No, I think I've heard that a lot from a number of different riders saying, oh, this one is good with it barefoot, but I wouldn't do it with the other ones because I think it would make it worse.
Correct. And also for me, I am interested to try it on my other top horse, Kalinka. But one reason I don't is it's successful with her having shoes, and also then I have a horse to go on the grass.
So would you never you would never put shoes on Caracol? You would actually just avoid jumping on grass? Because I know horses like King Edward, they will throw shoes on in order to put studs in. I know Richard Vogel will do that with United Touch. I mean, some riders will do that.
Yeah, you need especially when I'm in California, there isn't a shoer that I trust to do that very specific job. Putting on a shoe on a barefoot horse to jump on grass for a week. Your examples are great. Those shoes stay on those horses as little as possible. And there's a lot you have to do to get the shoe on correctly and to get the shoe off correctly while limiting the impact.
I would imagine you put one on, you poke a bunch of holes in there, and now you've sort of destroyed the lovely hoof capsule that you had created.
And how you trim the horse, how you trim a shod horse when you take the shoe off and you trim, their hoof, you do that trimming way different than you trim a barefoot horse. Yeah. So how do you trim that barefoot horse and then accept a shoe that doesn't mess it up too much when you pull the shoe off a week later?
Can you talk a little bit about what you think the difference is between those two? Like how you differently would shoe a barefoot one to one with shoes? Is there a major significant difference that would be easy to sort of understand?
Yes. The easiest way to explain it is when you look at a horseshoe, on the perimeter of the horseshoe, there's a bevel, especially in the toe, that is ground into the shoe.
Yeah.
When you don't have a shoe, that is ground into the hoof.
I see. So you create that on the edge versus a sharp edge.
Correct. Where when you trim a horse to accept a shoe, that edge, the wall, is flat to mate to the shoe, and then on the shoe here, you grind the bevel. Where that's all done on the hoof on a barefoot horse.
Sounds like an art, actually.
Shoeing is always an art, whether you're putting a shoe or you're trimming a barefoot horse. Shoeing always has been an art and probably always will be.
Yeah. Do you think that this new trend of people starting to maybe take their sport horses and pull the shoes off of those that they think would do best from it, do you think that this is a trend that's going to proliferate in our sport? Or do you think this is something that will remain mostly top tier horses at the very, very high level?
Yeah. I've been asked this question, especially since getting Caracol. I've been asked this question a lot, and I think it's going to proliferate, but I don't know if that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because, a little bit what we spoke about before, it takes a whole different skill set. Even if you're not doing, most people that have a barefoot horse still have a shoer, or in this case, a trimmer that does the trimming. But it still requires more from you, the person riding and managing that horse. And it's a different skill set, and it's a more challenging skill set, and it's a tough to learn skill set. And the consequences...
A time-consuming one, it sounds like.
Time-consuming. The consequences happen faster and are more aggressive if you make a mistake. And I worry that people will be too cavalier with just taking the shoes off. And, that's going to be better. But they didn't actually do enough research. They didn't work with their vet, with their shoer. They don't have a good enough shoer trimmer. And it'll actually injure more horses than it helps. The benefits of going barefoot can be huge, but they also can be huge the wrong direction. You can take the shoes off and it's unbelievably the worst idea you've ever done. Or
but you could just put the shoes just back on, no?
Yes. It's not always that simple, because sometimes the harm that came trying to make barefoot work, you then have to repair. And, it's like repairing a horse that had any injury, think of your many different limb injuries. And that can be challenging. And not because they got an injury necessarily, it's just an improper choice on which horse to pull the shoes off, or correct horse but wrong program. It's a challenge.
It is, for sure. I would believe that it is not such a simple thing to do. It's not a simple endeavor. One final question, actually. The one thing that you always hear all the time is when you pull a horse's shoes, it shortens their stride and pulls scope out of them. Obviously, you got Caracol already without shoes, and I had a conversation with Richard Vogel, and he mentioned with United Touch, he pulled the shoes intentionally to shorten the stride because his horse's stride was too big. Do you think that that is something that plays a role with pulling shoes and people should be wary of, does it shorten the stride? Does it take away scope?
I did attempt to pull the shoes off of another horse that I had. It was kind of, I'd had her for many years. She's actually now retired. And it was kind of one of those things where a horse towards the end of their showing career what we tried going barefoot as, hey, will this, extend? It was the wrong decision. But her stride definitely did get shorter.
Okay.
And if you're United Touch, that might be a very good thing.
Yeah.
You already have a short stride, might not be a good thing. On the scope side, I know it can happen, but I think it's really dependent on the horse. Because if the horse has really good feet, it does not get in the way of scope. You watch King Edward and you're not saying, oh shit, if he just put some shoes on it, the scope would be there. You know what I mean? Like, you're not thinking that. I think with horses whose feet are a little bit more on the edge of whether they should be barefoot or not, then you'll see some scope issues.
Okay, interesting.
I think the scope is not for every horse. I think the shortening of the stride is significantly more common.
Okay, interesting. Well, this was fascinating. You have anything else you want to add about the sort of shoe, no shoe debate?
I think it is not a decision one person should make.
A team collective effort.
It's not just, I'm going to take the shoes off my horse today. It is grossly irresponsible to do that. You need everyone on your team to be aware of it, to prepare for it before you do it, and to prepare for the ramifications, to understand how to see as soon as possible if it's working or if it's not working. And to understand it's not as simple as pull the shoes off, poof, great. It's a process, and it always will be. Even if it's successful and a good idea, it will always be a process that needs to be respected, or else you will cause more harm than good.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Karl. This was fabulous.
It's always good talking to you, Danny.
You too. Thank you so much for joining us.